And yeah, Scott, if you'd like to, you know, tell us who you are.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming by today. And I guess just a quick description of who I am is I'm a basic income advocate that got into this topic back in 2013. And I've been pretty much focused on only it since then. And along the way, I also crowdfunded my own basic income via Patreon. So I've been essentially living with my own basic income on a perpetual basis since 2016, which has actually helped me, better understand UBI as well, beyond just like kind of the academic sense, but really experiencing it. And right now I'm the senior advisor for Humanity Forward, and I'm also on the board of the Gerald Huff Fund for Humanity, which is a nonprofit focused on basic income. And I'm also the editor of Basic Income Today, which is a site focused on basic income news around the world.
I'd actually like to ask, of all the issues and topics in the world, what was it about UBI that resonated so strongly with you?
Yeah, so I got into this through the automation angle, which I know is a popular angle, but not everyone approaches basic income through that angle. But back in 2013, it was actually through a front page post on Reddit, which is there's a great discussion there about how quickly technology was advancing and how like people weren't really realizing how fast it was advancing and what that would really mean. And through that discussion, I discovered the book Mana by Marshall Brain, and after reading that, that really got me thinking about how much better the future could be if we really made the right choices to utilize technology for the good of everybody. And that author believed that basic income was the way to accomplish that. And so I started digging into basic income. And in doing so, I realized that, not only is it a good idea for automation reasons, but because it's good for a lot of other reasons, both like philosophically arguments, kind of libertarian arguments, and also really about kind of the realities of the safety net and how once I really started digging into those realities, I realized that there's just a massive amount of holes in the safety net, that there's all sorts of problems that could be solved by this unconditional basic income, by essentially recognizing kind of a human right to sufficient resources to exist. When I realized that it could actually correct so many different problems, and at least partially, if not fully, then I just thought that there's nothing else I could really focus on until we won this, because of just how many wide-ranging effects it has.
Yeah, I agree. Once you look a little bit deeper and you understand the impact that it could have, it's horrifying to think actually that we don't have some sort of system like this in place, with sort of the level of inequality that we've got going on here.
So I'm a huge fan of Andrew Yang, obviously, a former Democratic presidential candidate, an entrepreneur, and attorney, founder of Venture for America. And recently he was running for the New York City mayor race, which he was a front runner going in to being the first of 13 candidates to drop out. Now, you were recently on Yang Speaks, Andrew Yang's podcast. Could you share with us your friendship with Andrew Yang? And how or when did you two meet? And what are some of the projects you're working with him? You've been working with him or currently working with him. And last but not least, did you get an early peek into his book, Forward, which is coming out on October the 5th? That's a lot of questions, but I know you can do it.
Yeah, I guess I'll go kind of backwards on that one. Maybe just first of all, I'll just say that yes, I have already read his book. I read it last month, and I can say that I think that it's going to be I think a lot of people are going to love reading it. If you liked War on Normal People, then I consider this as kind of a sequel that's kind of more along lines of the media and democracy instead of automation and the economy. So both of them are going to go, really well together. So I suggest everyone reads both, actually. But yeah, it's great, and I'm looking forward to its release in October 5th. So yeah, people can actually pre-order that now if they want. And yeah, as far as when we first met, I would say that I think it was in early 2017. It may have been late 2016, but somewhere around there. And it was through I can't remember if the Economic Security Project had actually been founded yet, or if we were still in the process of it. But it was through that. So they were doing convenings of people around the country who were interested in basic income. And so we met through that first meeting. Then we met at multiple meetings aside from that. And so that's where we got to, meet in person and get to know each other better. And he had really, he had read my writings, and he enjoyed it a lot. He is full of energy for basic income. I would say he'd probably be the most energetic person in the room in those early days, and so I knew that he was very passionate about the idea, and so I was very excited when he visited New Orleans here prior to announcing his campaign, and told me that he was planning on running. So that was an exciting moment. I just immediately started thinking about how much of a difference that would make in the UBI discussion, not just here in the U.S. but actually around the world. And yeah, as far as projects, I would say that certainly I was involved in his presidential campaign, um, and I was not involved really in his mayoral campaign, but I will be involved in what's coming next. And so I'm not going to say what's coming next because that's really part of the book itself. But I'm definitely looking forward to the launch of that next big thing.
Wow, that is super exciting. So, Aaron, did you want it to ask the questions from Dan, or should we just? What do you think, Aaron?
We're just going to see how this goes. So I did have a question for you, Scott. Were you politically active or an activist before getting into this UBI?
Not really. I mean, there were things I was interested in. So I was actually really interested in the idea of a resource-based economy, and so I kind of considered myself as like part of the zeitgeist movement. And I had signed up for like my local chapter, and maybe I showed up for like a couple like online meetings and stuff. But that was really just the extent of it, because I was actually always stuck at how we actually get there. So I just thought it was a great idea, and I loved talking to people about it. But there was just a real barrier as to far as like answering the question, yeah, that sounds great, but how do we get there? So when I read Mana, that's when I connected those dots and realized that we could actually utilize UBI as a tool of transition to an entirely new economy that I think makes a lot more sense. I would actually love to us to get to more of a Star Trek world. So, in along those kind of lines of thinking, it was UBI that made me feel that there was actually something I could really get heavily involved in, that we actually could accomplish instead of just kind of talking about something.
That's actually so cool that you said the Star Trek world, because I think of that too. I think of like in the future, how everyone's just going to have like their credits, and everyone has like a role, and yeah.
So we're just gonna dive into the next question here, Scott. Is One of the pros to universal basic income, obviously, is UBI, is that it reduces poverty and income inequality, and also it improves physical and mental health. Can you share your top three pros and cons about UBI?
Um, it's tough to pick only three. I guess off the top of my head, I think the increased entrepreneurship impact that is seen over and over again is definitely one of my favorites because it really speaks to kind of this um, untapped potential of humanity where people have all kinds of great ideas, but they kind of lack the capital or they worry about the risk of failure. And so these things don't get done or worked on. And so I just think that in an environment where everybody actually has this capital and there's less risk of failure, that we could accomplish so much more. So I'm really excited about all of these different ideas and projects out there that people could start working on with UBI. Um, Second, besides that, I'm really interested in the trust aspects of basic income, where we see where we observe an increase of trust among recipients, and that's trust between people in general, trust of the government, trust of the legal institutions. I think that we are basically kind of in this epidemic of this erosion of trust, kind of system wide across everything. And part of that, I think, is this it's kind of like society is built on a foundation of distrust where you are, say, worthless until you prove that you have value or that you don't deserve the access to the resources you need to live unless you go through this bureaucratic test to successfully prove that you're worthy under certain conditions. I think that if you just start from a default of trust and you actually are saying, I trust you with the resources you need to live, and I think that that really is responsible for this increase in trust. And I think that that would really help because I'm even looking right now at, say, vaccine hesitancy, which has a lot to do with the distrust in the government and experts and science and things. And if we had more trust, I think it would be less of an issue. So it's just this lack of trust causes all kinds of problems. And then third, I would say that I'm also really interested in, even just it's, let's say there's one kind of thing that you see over and over again is the babies that are born with healthier weights because mothers have better maternal nutrition when they have this unconditional income. And I think that's interesting to think about because of the fact that this is a long-term kind of human existence, long kind of effect, where if your environment in the womb is better, then it usually tends to the person tends to be a healthier adult. They are usually able to earn more income, and they there's less crime, and also because this better health can actually be passed on to kids through epigenetics. So I think that this kind of epigenetic effect of basic income is really interesting, where generation after generation could potentially progressively get healthier and healthier, and combined with like this impact of this increased IQ versus, I mean, as a result of kind of this reduced cognitive overload of income and security could lead to just a higher functioning society in general. And then sort of the cons that I think, this kind of three things, it's purely what I call the kind of the eye of beholder effects. I don't think there's really any cons personally, but I do think that for certain people that they will see those as cons. So like, let's say, one effect is that if you are an abusive person, you're going to find it a lot harder to abuse your partner if they have this source of financial independence and can leave you. So abusive people might see UBI as something that's detrimental. And same thing with payday loan lenders. I mean, these people profit off of essentially this lack of income, the scarcity of income for people. And so they're able to charge just massive interest rates to people in need because they lack money. So I think that they're not going to be too happy about basic income, and experiments actually show that, where they're not the money lenders are the ones that really dislike UBI. And also another observed effect we're even seeing right now is people who, let's say, refuse to work because they have an income. And so that refusal to work, it's not laziness. It's that they are refusing the conditions and pay on offer. So if you're an employer and you want someone to work at slave wages, then you're not going to really like UBI because it empowers people to refuse those that pay and those work conditions and demand better and continue to demand those conditions be met until they are met, and then they can say yes. So one way of thinking about it too is I consider basic income to be the power to say no and the freedom to say yes. And so yeah, if you're an employer who is going to take advantage of your employees, then you might not lack basic income either.
On that note, Scott, I wanted to pull a bit of information from you because you mentioned about uh, you know, people refuse to work not because of one reason but the other. But since the pandemic, with the federal government started from former President Trump and now to President Biden, people have been getting these checks in the mail, unemployment, the case may be, where I've read a lot of news that basically are saying that there are jobs out there, but because of these checks, that people still don't want to go back to work. I don't know how to tie that with your UBI, but it's, in terms of the working folks, unemployment. What are your thoughts about that, if you have any?
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting to look at this kind of data that's a result of the stimulus checks and the various boosts as kind of informing basic income. So first of all, like when it comes to the unemployment boost, there's definitely a difference between unemployment and basic income, because unemployment gives you the choice of the unemployment income or the job, because once you become employed, then you lose the unemployment income. So if you're receiving, $1,500 per month in unemployment and a job offer is for, say, $2,000 per month, then you're effectively doing a job for $500 extra per month. And so does that make sense? And UBI doesn't have that same disincentive because it adds to all income. So you'd be, let's say, receiving $1,500 per month as a UBI, and then you're offered a $2,000 per month job, and the total you're looking at now is $3,500 instead of a total of $2,000. So the incentives are much different. And so these incentives of like the stimulus checks are, I think, closer to a basic income, because the stimulus check doesn't care whether you are employed or not employed. It does care if your income is too high, but for the most part, if you're looking at the bottom or middle of the labor market, then there isn't that same impact. So actually, it would have been better to just do monthly stimulus checks, and then there would be no disincentive to accept any form of employment. Now, with that said, the data also doesn't bear out that people, let's say, are refusing jobs because of these things. Like their jobs are going unfilled, but it's to a small degree, this stimulus checks and unemployment boost. To a larger degree, it's the fact that we're still in a pandemic, that maybe someone needed to drop out of the labor market to take care of their kids, and let's say let's say schools are still closed, childcare isn't available, so they can't go back into the labor market. And those are the kind of decisions that are driving more of people's choices right now. And also along those lines too, it's important to point out, I think, that when you say people are refusing to work, but they're at home doing unpaid work, then obviously they're not refusing to work. They're just not employed in a job, but they're not doing nothing. They're doing unpaid care work. And so again, UBI is something that recognizes, supports, and enables unpaid care work, whereas a lot of other things, let's say welfare, jobs, those things don't support unpaid care work.
Wow, thank you so much. Aaron, I think you're next.
Yeah, so I've actually got a kind of interesting question, perhaps. Maybe it's a situation. So, okay, I have many different thoughts and ideas, right? But one of them is that I think a lot of businesses, let's say like restaurants, stores, like all these kinds of things, if they can't pay their employees a livable wage, I think that maybe they shouldn't even be in business. And so I was just curious, like, there's a lot of places out there that I think, in my eyes, run what I would call almost like illegitimate businesses. Again, like when we get to like slave wages and crazy hours, and a lot of these people that run these businesses are doing quite well for themselves. And so, would you be down for some sort of like cataclysmic destruction of our economy and sort of a rebuild in a way that actually does create livable jobs and wages?
Yeah, so I think that a labor market without basic income doesn't function as well as a labor market with basic income. So if you have a labor market without basic income, let's say you have people who are in jobs who are only in those jobs because they need the income, and meanwhile you have people who are unemployed who really want a job, but then they can't find a job because the jobs are full of people who don't really want those jobs but are in them. So when you have basic income, again, with this power to say no and freedom to say yes, then I think that that's going to adjust the labor market in a much better way, where you have employers who, let's say, if you're an employer offering a job that few people want, and maybe the work itself is considered harmful to society or less valuable, or it certainly is not paying enough for what the work is, then that's going to need to pay more. And they can either, reduce their profits or pass on the costs to their customers. There are choices that they can do, but they're definitely going to need to either pay people more or invest in more automation. Now, on the other hand, if you're you're an employer who has jobs that people really want, they're meaningful, they're socially useful. People really want to do them to the point where even right now they're accepting less pay in order to do something that means something to them. Then I think those employers are going to have it much easier. So they could potentially pay even less than they do now because there's such a demand for those jobs because people really want to do them. And so I think that you're going to see UBI functioning as kind of like a subsidy for work that people feel is valuable and intrinsically motivated, whereas it's going to do the opposite and drive up wages of jobs that people don't find to be valuable and find to be destructive or something that automation would be better at. And that's also great for automation, because one of the reasons automation doesn't exist to the degree it does now is because human labor is too cheap, and people are willing to do whatever they can in order to get any money they can. So if you have this floor, then I think you're going to see a lot more automation, and I think that's good for everybody, for these jobs that people don't really like to be automated.
Okay, cool. I did actually want to go back to something. When it comes to your roles at Humanity Forward, Fund for Humanity, and Basic Income, like Basic Income Today, could you tell us about what you do there, and then also what is the impact of these things?
Sure. So let's say I'll start with Basing Today. So that's a news website. I try to do 2 news pieces a day where this kind of a central located source where people can go and make sure that they stay in the loop on what stuff is happening, especially in the U.S., but also all over the world in regards to basic income. It's a great way to stay up to date. And the Gerald Hunt Fund for Humanity is a nonprofit focused on basic income. One of those projects is Basic Income Today, but also one of the projects that's coming up is Basic Income March, and I definitely want people to know about that. You can go to basicincome.march.com, and there will be marches coming up. It'll be the 3rd annual Basic Income March, where there's going to be marches all over the world. People can either sign up for an existing march that's planned in their city, or can even plan their own march as well if they want to take the lead on that one. And that's coming up on September 25th. And as regards to Humanity Forward, I'm advising multiple different projects and things that they do. I would say that, say as an example of my work there, is what happened with the child tax credit, and also going forward with the goal of lobbying for the child tax credit to be made permanent. And so that's definitely one of the goals in the immediate term, is in regards to Humanity Forward's efforts. I think that the monthly child tax credit is really the stepping stone for UBI in the U.S., as parents get to experience 6 months of this monthly income security. And I think that it'll be something that grows more popular over time. And I think that that winning that fight is a big one. And so I guess when it comes to Humanity Forward, think of us as like lobbyists for the people, where we're actually lobbying to make sure that everyone actually starts getting a basic income, feels some kind of economic security, and that we get there.
Another question, real quick. Could you repeat everything you said in the last 30 minutes for Dan? I'm just kidding. Welcome, Dan.
Yeah, welcome, Dan. Finally, he'll share with us why he's a little bit late. But again, to those who came in to the room late, we wanted to share with you that our usual host, Tim, Doge Militia, he's been busy because he is a physician, a doctor. So he's been quite busy on the road traveling. So he's gonna take some time off, and in the meantime, Dan has been gracious enough to take his place as our co-host for the next few events, hopefully. Dan, go ahead and take over, and I guess you can share with Scott and everybody why you're a little bit late.
Hey, it's so nice to meet you, Scott. And I'm sorry about that, guys. My PSU took a crap on me, and I had to check my PDU to make sure it was still good, and then get my rig back online. And when you're in the rig room, time goes by fast. I apologize.
Well, it's good to hear. Good to hear you.
So basically, the pandemic, it's completely transformed much of the way that our economy and various industries have been operating. And the stimulus has also had an effect on our labor force. So I was just curious, how do you see employment and job opportunities moving forward, being that many people are now seeking both better jobs and higher paying jobs? And also, how can UBI fit in with people seeking better and higher paying jobs?
Well, I guess that I did kind of already cover that a little bit. So I don't know if I want to retread that. But I guess in addition to what I already said, um, I think that yeah, we are in this kind of changed post kind of pandemic environment where a lot of kind of changes have been made that could very well be permanent. Where we certainly all got a lot more used to Zooming and working from home, and as a result of that, there was a lot of moving where, say, people fled the cities and went to more like suburbs and rural areas because now they could actually work from home and not have to worry about that daily commute as much. And I think that basic income, will also do that same thing. Where I've always felt that actually one of the benefits of a UBI would be this kind of rebalancing of the population densities, where it would make more sense for people to be able to live in lower cost of living areas that would ease pressure off of the cities that have just been getting more and more expensive as these cities became the only places where you could earn really a livable income. And so I think that those two definitely relate to each other. And I'd also like to see this kind of redefining of even the work week, where kind of there's an understanding that you don't have to be in the office like 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, in order to best accomplish whatever your work is. Like, you actually can be more productive if you have more flexibility to your time, and if you're able to decide for yourself, um, when to work and how long to work, and that can lead to a lot better work life kind of balance. And I'd also say just that's something that I've learned myself, even having a basic income, is that I'm able to focus really my time in the way that I personally feel it should be spent. And I think that's leads to higher productivity and better well-being too, to have that in control, and that ability to self-determine like what hours and stuff make sense to you. So hopefully these kind of changes will be more permanent going forward, and then we'll even actually achieve, like, say, a 4-day work week too, besides just more flexible schedules and work that pays more, jobs that are more automated, and even say more volunteering, and just people pursuing in general what they feel is important for them to be doing, instead of just having some job that may not even necessarily need to exist.
Yeah, so while we're gonna give Dan a few minutes to get settled too as well, I'm just gonna go ahead and ask my next two questions, which I'm going to shift the topic a little bit, Scott. Let's dive straight into cryptocurrency. A lot of our listeners today, and those who couldn't make it today, is gonna listen to our YouTube channel. We're into cryptocurrency, specifically Dogecoin, Bitcoin, probably Ethereum third in line. What are your thoughts about cryptocurrencies, to even digital currencies like the digital dollar, the digital yuan, etc.,
Mhm.
to Bitcoin, and of course, as I've mentioned, most of us here, Dogecoin is our favorite. Could you speak about how you first learned about cryptocurrency, and then what are your thoughts today about it?
Sure. So actually, I got into, or at least I discovered Bitcoin back in, gosh, I guess it was 2009. Um, Maybe it was 2010, but I think it was 2009. And so that was, very early days. Um, I found it because I was interested in. I watched this kind of YouTube documentary that someone put together on their own, and like one of the things that they talked about that was something called um, I think it was the human coin. Yeah, and this idea of this cryptocurrency that even though it didn't exist, but it was an idea, and so it was this cryptocurrency that someone would let's say get like I think it was one every hour or maybe it was the one every day. Um, but I thought that was really interesting to consider this currency that everyone would get based on like the hours of their life instead of work. And it's interesting that was again before I even got into the concept of basic income, but that was actually something that seemed very appealing um, as a form of currency. And so I looked up more about this, and I found Bitcoin. And it's funny. I wish had I had just moved at the time, and so I had whereas I used to have both a desktop and a laptop. I'd actually left my desktop behind, gave it to my former roommate in Arizona before I moved to Louisiana. So I actually would have set up a mining rig there even in those early days. Had I done that, I didn't want to set up mining on my laptop because I didn't like leave it on all the time. And so looking back, boy, that would have been much different to mine back then. But I'm sure I would have spent it along the way too. It's not like I'd still have a bunch of bitcoins from that early. But yeah, I just thought that was a really interesting concept, and followed cryptocurrency since then, and was very interested to see how it developed over time. And I still am excited about where it's going to go and develop over time. I definitely think that it's here to stay, and that there's um, a lot of new innovations that it can make possible itself, or also to even to encourage, just like say the digital dollar is a good example, where because there's been these innovations that it has accomplished, that now countries are thinking, okay, well, we need to actually improve the way our own systems work along these lines, or else we're going to lose out um, to these new forms of currency. And I guess as far as like favorites and stuff too, I guess I'm more interested in these kind of currencies that have some kind of purpose. So I respect Dogecoin as being something that has created a real community around it. I'm more interested in things like Ethereum as far as smart contracts go, and everything that it makes possible. I'm interested in things like, let's say, I think Helium is really interesting, where you have like this kind of crowdsourced model of a mesh network for uh, IoT devices. I think that's really interesting. And things like, let's say, the enabling of decentralized storage, decentralized computing, all these kind of like use cases I'm kind of fascinated by. And I'm kind of less interested in things like Bitcoin, where it's just kind of like an asset kind of thing.
Well, that's pretty cool. I mean, 2009, that was literally the birth of Bitcoin itself. I believe it was created January of 2009. So, um, you know, I don't know of any friends today who have literally held Bitcoin since 2009. I do believe I know a few who's been holding Bitcoin since maybe 2013, 2012, somewhere there.
Mhm.
But yeah, but wow, that's really early on. My final question about cryptocurrency, unless Aaron and Dan wanted to hop in, with their own questions would be, Scott, is would you like the United States to adopt the digital dollar? Why or why not?
So I think that even outside the digital dollar kind of discussion, I think that one of the innovations that the Fed should do is to actually create personal Fed accounts for every American. And I think that the Fed should have the power to actually basically do quantitative easing for the people when it deems necessary, where instead of injecting, hundreds of billions of dollars a month into, the top of the economy in the hopes that it trickles down, instead it actually does a wide base with a grow up kind of approach where the money can flow upwards through the economy as a way of, stimulating and preventing recessions. So on its own, I think that that's something we need to do. Now, the digital dollar also goes along with that, where we can actually, essentially, set up people's wallets, with the Fed, and really remove these barriers. I think that, even outside of the digital dollar, postal banking is important. I think that we should actually make a point of banking every American with, like, the absolute, no frills kind of banking that everyone can access through their local post office and also online. And again, that goes right along with this digital dollar approach, where I think that there just simply is an incentive, thanks to being outcompeted by cryptocurrencies over time, that it makes sense to really include more people into the monetary system, reduce those frictions, make sure everybody has a wallet, make sure everybody can access it. And I think that we're essentially going to be forced into that too. I think that with the Chinese yuan, that we're already seeing kind of this acceleration of the U.S. government really debating the digital dollar. So I just think it's kind of inevitable that I think we're going to do that, and I think that there's good reasons to do it. And I think that it could definitely help make both the UBI possible and also make recessionary responses by the Fed more effective in a way that has more bang for the buck and doesn't increase inequality like quantitative easing does.
Aaron and Dan, did you guys wanted to add something about cryptocurrency?
No, not quite yet.
Dan, you good?
Yeah, I think he hit a lot of good points as far as focusing on the cryptocurrencies that have a good backing and meaning behind them, and being more wary of other ones that are more popular because of emotional reasons. No, that's spot on. I like it, Scott.
And actually, I lied. I did have a question. When it comes to UBI, do you have any thoughts on if that were to be paid out in a cryptocurrency as opposed to a fiat?
Yeah, so actually, I'm really excited about Proof of Humanity's current UBI implementation, and that's something that anyone can sign up for, where the point of it is to essentially get every single human being onto the blockchain, and so people can go to Proof of Humanity and set up an account, and you'll actually essentially start receiving what I described earlier as what I thought of as human coin, a long time ago. It's now actually basically real, where people get streamed this UBI currency at a constant rate and of 1 UBI per hour. And there's nothing you have to do to get it except for being a human and going through the process to prove you actually are unique human. And so thanks to that kind of proof of uniqueness, then of course that can actually make a lot of other interesting things possible. And thanks to the UBI component of it, I think incentivizes people to sign up for it in a way that, let's say, a lot of others kind of projects don't. And I think that too is interesting because I think that it's in the best interests of a lot of other projects to essentially pay their users of that cryptocurrency at least some value of the total cryptocurrency. And so I would really like to see that kind of spread through the cryptocurrency realm as well, where actually a bunch of different cryptocurrencies could provide either crypto UBI or some variant of that, where and then across all of those projects, that value could actually be substantial to people's kind of daily lives as far as being able to utilize that to afford even just their basic needs, or to even set that aside as a nest egg for later.
Great. Dan, I think you're next.
All right, I'll go ahead and read my next question. So, my next question is about healthcare. So, the healthcare system in this country is broken. I just would like to know what your vision is for how it should operate and how it should be accessible.
Yeah, I like to look at, say, healthcare and a bunch of other things as kind of an efficiency perspective. I don't think it's efficient to have these current setup where we don't really have competition in the healthcare market. It's not really adaptive. It's not like there's sufficient signaling going on where people are deciding which hospital to go to when they're having a heart attack, or even the choice of between insurance providers. There often isn't. It's just not something competitive, and instead you have a bunch of administration across all these different insurance providers having these administrative jobs that just overlap. And then of course you're also requiring so much time of doctors to actually do this administrative bureaucratic burden that takes away from their patients and what they're doing. So I just think it makes more sense to kind of utilize the more single payer approach. We have seen it work in a bunch of other countries. It need not be exactly as other countries have done, but I think that we could certainly learn from other countries and do the same thing here, where you just have the government handles the single payer portion of it, and you reduce all of that bureaucracy. And also, just as a side to that too, I think one of the reasons why we've never done that, like one of the barriers, and this is something even that Obama said when he was president, is he was worried about what would happen to all the people who lost their jobs as a result of universal health care. Like, if you suddenly don't need all those administrators doing all the administrative work, then you're going to put them all, you're going to make them all employed, and then what then? So I think that again, that's kind of an example of how jobs continue to exist and are perpetuated by this need for employment in order to get your survival income and participate in society. So I think if we decouple that, then it'll be a lot easier to make changes, like when it comes to the healthcare system. And also say that there's definitely an important interaction between the healthcare system and basic income too, because say 80 to 90% of health outcomes are actually determined by the social determinants of health and not medical care. So if you actually say make sure that people have access to what they need to live, that they're able to purchase healthy foods that they choose, that they feel food insecurity, that they feel actual economic security, that there's less stress, that there's less instability in their lives, that they're going to be healthier. You're going to see less instances of things like diabetes and heart disease, cancer, depression, all of this stuff. So there's going to be less of a burden on the healthcare system after adopting a UBI. I consider it to be like a vaccine approach, where through prevention of these poor health outcomes, that you're actually able to utilize a lot fewer resources on healthcare itself. So they actually work very well together.
Yeah, I
And
think
Dan?
so. I was just going to say, I think that's a really good answer. And it actually reminds me a lot of when Bernie Sanders had done their first Medicare for All town hall back, I believe in like 2015 or 2016. They had a dentist come in and talk about how once a year they'll go out and do a clinic and they'll do some free work for people who can't afford to have dental work done. And they'll
Mhm.
have people who haven't seen a dentist in like 10 years come in, and they're doing all this work pro bono to help the community, but at the same time, uh, the work that has to be done after 10 years of negligence and not being able to see a dentist is far more expensive than if the person had just been seeing a dentist regularly and upkeeping their teeth. So
Yeah,
just something that
exactly.
reminded me of.
I was curious, Viz, since you're up here, no pressure, but if you had any questions right now.
Oh, yes. Yes, actually, I don't know if it was already mentioned, but you know how whenever we talk about UBI or anything, you always got to have that naysayer, right? Who says, "Oh, but how are we going to pay for it? How is it going to work?" But with the crypto thing, I actually wanted to ask to those who want to be upset and say that, "Oh, crypto is going to hurt the economy" or something. Like, what would Scott? How would you respond to someone like that? If about the human coin. That's what I was talking about.
Um, First of all, I guess I would say too that I think that one impact of the stimulus checks, and even the unemployment boost is just, I think, that helped the entire cryptocurrency community, because I think a lot of people were able to actually buy into Bitcoin, buy into Ethereum, even discover these things that maybe they couldn't afford before. um, and it gives people this new avenue of investing that perhaps a lot of people didn't have before. And so we've got like the retail trading apps that have certainly grown recently too, that also got a boost from these stimulus checks and stuff as well, and have been making it cheaper and even possible for people to own like micro shares, instead of full shares of stuff. That's kind of democratized the owning of like stocks and stuff. But I'm excited by the ability of basic income to actually enable more people to get into cryptocurrency, make those investments. And I also say that that certainly has no inflationary impact on the economy as well. There's, you know, people can buy as many cryptocurrencies as they want. There's no essentially limit to that. You increase the value of those cryptocurrencies, but you're certainly not going to make food more expensive. It's not like the price of a car is going to go up because Bitcoin has gone up. So I think that um, there's certainly this um, ability for crypto to grow, and I think that they're complementary. Again, I'm really interested in the projects that cryptocurrency um, makes possible, like you know, incentivizing this decentralization of things in a way that it's really difficult outside of that. And the ability even to empower, you know, coding, the free software movement, enabling people to actually focus on, working on some crypto project to contribute to the various GitHubs out there. um, it's something that you need to be able to essentially afford to do often. And again, UBI makes these things more possible, that you're more able to focus on this kind of work that you're more interested in. And I just think that there's a lot of really cool projects out there that I think could really benefit from more people being able to get involved with them.
I really love that answer, and I'm actually taking notes because I've come across so many people who really just try to put UBI down like it's going to be the worst thing in the world. But what's funny is so long ago, people were even complaining about like, oh, the newspaper and people like being able to like read and get information faster, and they're like saying, oh, that's going to be a trouble too, and that's like not a big deal. So like I feel like UBI is going to be what you were talking about, the thing that really sets us free to do the work we want to do and be able to participate in the crypto and the stocks that we would like to participate in for once. Like that is wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, my one of my friends, you may know him as the UBI guy on Twitter. He's Conrad Shaw. He's actually working on a basic income documentary called Bootstraps that followed around 20 Americans provided a basic income for 3 years, and he says that he likes to think of like a post UBI world as kind of being like a post slow motion replay world, where like there, if you go back, you'll find like all these arguments about like how slow motion is going to like destroy the sport somehow, and then all of a sudden they introduced it, and it's just like, well, now it makes sense. Like, of course, slow motion replay, that makes sense. So I like that kind of look as, I do think that we'll look back and just be as like entirely common sense, and it just will, all these arguments against it will just seem absolutely ridiculous. I think another example is, and I think it's entertaining too to even look at these arguments against the 5-day work week back when that wasn't the thing. And so you see people talking about like how lazy everybody is, that they only want to work 5 days a week, and that like the true hardworking Americans work 6 or 7 days a week even, but definitely at least 6 days. And so here we are now, and that just seems ridiculous that the 6 days was normal. And I think that we're already reaching the point where 5 days is ridiculous, and when 4 days becomes normal, and every weekend is a 3-day weekend, and that's normal, we'll look back and be like, well, geez, like why did we ever do 5 days for so long?
Yeah, so I guess we should maybe elephant in the room when it comes to UBI. Where does the money come from? How do we pay for this?
Yeah, I was even thinking about covering that next, just as something to include. Anyways, so yeah, that's definitely one of the top 3 most asked questions. Okay, so first of all, I would say, where does the money for poverty come from? The costs of poverty are extremely expensive, and we all bear those costs. The costs of child poverty alone has been calculated as exceeding $1 trillion a year. The cost of crime has been calculated as being around $3 trillion per year. We spend trillions of dollars a year on our healthcare system, and again, UBI would reduce those costs. So I think that it's also important to look at all that we're currently spending, but like it's not that we're getting bills in the mail for. We don't get some bill in the mail that says, okay, you owe this much for crime and poor health and child poverty and these things. It's calculated into everything in the form of higher taxes, higher prices, all of it. So I think that if we look at UBI as this preventative measure that can save a lot of these costs we're already spending, that it essentially will pay for itself to a great degree. And there's evidence for that too. If you look at the North Carolina Cherokee dividend there, and that was if you look at it in the context of the Smoky Mountain study of youth, where this kind of turned into this natural experiment where a group of kids being studied, their parents started receiving a basic income, and a group of parents who were part of the experiment, a group of kids whose parents were part of the experiment, they did not receive this basic income. And over time, you did see the savings, because it was a longitudinal study for over 10 years, and they're still looking back and comparing to how it started. And they did an analysis that showed that, the improved educational outcomes, the reduction in crime, better health, actually exceeded the total distribution over that time of those dividends. So I would say that to a great degree, we're already paying for basic income. We're just doing it in a really dumb way. And we could just make sure that everybody receives this to start. And I'd also recommend people look into this. It was an analysis that came out. I can't remember when it came out. Maybe it was last year or a matter of months ago. I think it was last year. As far as looking at, had inequality not increased since the 70s, when productivity decoupled from wages, where, how much higher people's incomes would be now. And it was calculated as essentially the top 1% is getting $2.5 trillion per year that would be going to the bottom 90%. And so there you go. As far as, had inequality not increased, then we actually could be distributing a basic income already. It's just that basic income, all of those productivity dividends from all that economic growth over the past few decades has just been flowing to the top instead of everybody. So I think it's important to make sure that the slice of the economy that should be flowing to everyone actually does. And then if we're talking about, taxes and, the ability to afford basic income, then I'd also stress that we already are doing a bunch of programs that are conditional and means tested in regards to welfare. We already have a bunch of programs that are essentially welfare through the tax code, as far as various tax subsidies, deductions, and tax expenditures in general. And if you turn those into a UBI, then for the things that make sense to do that for, then the total cost of a basic income, goes down as well. And then finally, I'd also mention that essentially the entire economy works even kind of from a crypto approach of mint and burn anyways, where federal spending is essentially minting money into existence. Banks mint money into existence through loans, and taxes actually burn that money. People paying off their debts burns that money. So it's not so much that the government needs to come up with money in order to afford basic income. They could just do it. The challenge then is what the taxes should be on the back end to balance out the economy and create the best incentive structure so that you're not only removing money from the money supply in a smart way that manages inflation to the degree that we want to manage it at, but it also creates smart incentives. So, does it make sense to tax income if that's something, that if we're thinking of taxing as wanting to reduce things we don't want, doesn't it make more sense to do things like, a carbon tax? Doesn't it make more sense to, say, tax essentially overconsumption, so that if you're consuming much more than everybody else, that you're a net payer into the system, and if you aren't consuming all that much, then you are a net recipient of consumption power. There's just a lot of different smart ways of going about taxes that I think are much more interesting to consider, instead of thinking about the tax revenue potential of these programs that I think are it's not really the point, I think, of taxes.
Yeah, I wanted to give a second if Dan, Jenny, or Viz wanted to follow up on that before we get a few questions from the listeners.
No, I'm good. Yeah, we have a lot of. I'm seeing a lot of listeners are up, so I'm good. Dan.
I mean, I think you hit the point right on. The only thing I would ask, I'm just curious, are you familiar with modern money theory at all?
Yeah, that's basically I was kind of using that approach there. I'm actually working on an article. I've been working on it basically all year, actually, as far as creating kind of a very detailed kind of both a summary introduction for people to modern monetary theory, and also why it actually needs to utilize UBI as its a foundation. Whereas I think a lot of MMT people currently think a job guarantee is the best foundation, and I just don't think that that's correct.
And I agree with you, actually. I do. I think UBI would be a much better foundation than a federal jobs guarantee.
Go ahead,
Oh, I
Viz.
was just going to agree with Dan there that the federal job guarantee, how is it going to guarantee that everybody wants to do the jobs that are available? Like again, that's just more of the same, more of them forcing us to do work they deem as worthy. And while maybe that won't work for us in our lives, and I think this whole pandemic and this whole situation is a perfect time. Like if you're waiting for the time, this is the time to where we need to start figuring out ways on how to invest in ourselves and let us, like what Scott was saying, to do the work that we want to do, and be able to afford it, and be able to have those funds available and coming in. And I think also, there's going to be a lot of people way up top who may not want us to have that freedom. But we
Also, real quick, happy 420, everyone.
Ooh, 420.
What you were just saying, hitting on what Scott had said earlier about more jobs becoming virtual and people being able to kind of spread out and not being stuck in those urban areas anymore. As I just traveled across my state these last few weeks, I was actually in a bunch of little towns that, once were very flourishing towns for lumber and for different resources that they no longer have available, towns that have basically died out. And now they're seeing new money come in, like these giant, 5,000 square foot mansions that have been foreclosed in for sale for years. People are starting to buy these places up and move out to the middle of nowhere because they're working virtually, which is very cool to see here in Arkansas.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting to consider what the pandemic, showed us again about work, what's valuable, what's needed. There were just tens of millions of people who became unemployed, and we started, lifting up onto pedestals, at least temporarily, who we called essential workers, doing essential work, and they needed to keep working in order for the wheels of society to function. But at the same time, all these people didn't. And the economy, everyone still got enough food to eat. Everyone had their basic needs met. A lot of people's even incomes weren't even all that impacted. But there's certain things that people couldn't do anymore. But I think this kind of goes to David Graeber's like bullshit jobs argument, where he was, thinking about and talking about just, how many jobs are there in existence that don't need to exist. Like there's certain jobs that absolutely need to exist, and if they went on strike, then those would cause serious problems. And there's also jobs that if they went on strike, nobody would care about at all, and it wouldn't change their day-to-day lives at all. So how valuable are these jobs? So I think that basic income, and this was even the point and conclusion of his book, where he felt that really the only way to reduce the amount of unnecessary work out there being done was through a basic income. And whereas when it comes to like a job guarantee from this perspective, it is not going to get rid of this unnecessary work. Like you could potentially have some people shifting out of a bullshit job into a guaranteed job that's doing something important like infrastructure or something. But for the most part, I think a lot of people are going to stay in their jobs, and it's just not going to have the same impact that a UBI would. And from an MMT perspective, that's not a maximum, theoretical capacity of the economy if there's so many people doing stuff that doesn't even need to be done when they could be doing something that's different and far more productive. And so if you have a UBI, then that really helps not do the stuff that's not important, and certainly empowers and enables people to find the things that are actually important. And I just think that would lead to, again, a much higher functioning economy.
Well, I also think on the MMT side, we could even have more than one foundation, because the whole purpose of it is that the federal government's the issuer and we can't run out of money. And as long as the money that we're creating and giving from the issuer out isn't going into the economy, as long as it's going towards, programs like single payer healthcare, infrastructure, UBI, and federal jobs guarantee, then it'll, prevent that from turning into inflation. I'm kind of go big or go home. I think we should just do it all.
Oh, sure. And my argument, I'm not saying that, let's say, we can't afford to guarantee jobs. It's really kind of, what is the best way of matching people to employment that is actually necessary and of greatest productivity. And so I think that the even the goal of jobs itself should be to accomplish some kind of important task, and that there's a danger to focusing on job creation, because you can imagine this possibility where, like, a infrastructure project is lauded for employing 1,000 people, when actually it could be done with like 10 people, given some big machinery and massive kind of automation kind of thing. Like, I'm really interested in the full employment of robots. Like, I think that we should automate as much as we can, and in order to, like, kind of maintain that perspective of doing the most that we can with the least amount of effort and human resources, I think we need to really be smart about what jobs that we're creating, and we should definitely invest in those jobs and make as many of them as we can that make sense. But we should avoid employing people for the sake of employment. And that's what kind of worries me about the guarantee aspect of a job guarantee. But at the same time, I think that it's important for the government to invest in jobs that perform an important function that is actually even more efficient for the government to do than the private sector to do, or the private sector isn't doing it on its own. Like, again, healthcare is a good example of that, where I think the government could do it more efficiently.
Wow. And Aaron, I wanted to share, I believe we have 4 speakers up with their own questions, and I have 4, actually 5 now, pending questions in DM. So if we can alternate, and I will read the Twitter handle of these DM questions so everybody can verify who they are. They already gave me permission. So Aaron, if you can alternate one speaker in the room, and then I'll read one DM questions for Scott.
Yeah, so we'll do it in this order. So we'll go Brent. I know he's been patiently waiting, and then we'll go to you, Jenny, with your DM question. Then we'll go Hannah, vice versa, Matthew, then Sass, and we'll keep it going that way.
My question is, how will UBI help the disabled community?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think that right now, absent UBI, all disability assistance approaches leave out far too many people with a disability. Even so, in the U.S. right now, about 1 in 5 Americans has some form of disability, and if you look at that 1 in 5, about 1 in 5 of them is actually receiving some form of disability assistance, either SSI or SSDI. And so I think that's a big problem, where there's just far too many people being excluded, and there's far too many people not passing the test of being sufficiently disabled in order to get any help. And I think that, if we have a system where you either qualify for, say, $1,000 per month, and help, even that's not really what it is, but let's just say that's what it is. Then, and if you don't qualify for it, then you fall to zero. And that's just a huge problem. And if you have a floor that's set at $1,000 per month, then everyone starts there. So you can still go through this process of, trying to prove that you're sufficiently disabled in order to get extra disability assistance. But if you have that UBI, you're never going to be at zero, and you're going to make sure that, for every 5 people with disability, all 5 are actually not living in poverty. Whereas right now, only 1 in 5 is getting anything. And of course, even right now, it's not even enough to not live in poverty. So I think that UBI is a foundation. Again, it's missing and it needs to be there. And that any program that we have on top of it would work far better existing on top of that. And I also think that it should even, be easier to qualify for, and that it should not be taken away with earned income. So there should be kind of a component of unconditionality to disability assistance that we're not currently doing. So right now we're saying that, if you earn $5,000 a month, then you're obviously, don't need any disability assistance. And I think that we should just recognize that if you have a disability, then you should definitely get an extra amount that's on top of the basic income, and that it should not go away just because you earn too much money. It should be clawed back, say, through the tax code, like everybody else.
All right. So the next question comes from Saz Official in DM, but Saz, you have the speaker now. Would you go ahead and ask Scott yourself? Go ahead, Saz.
Yeah. It's this is gonna be the same thing I put in the DM. So Scott. So I think you've seen me around. I'm a huge UBI advocate, but I'm wondering, do you have any concerns about unexpected macroeconomic effects? The Kenya trial is going really well, and I'm super excited about that. But I wonder if a potential sudden mass urbanization in a developed country like the U.S. could cause unpredicted negative effects. And I'm particularly thinking about infrastructure that takes big projects that take a really long time to build, such as new waterways or whatever it may be. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic.
Sure. I think I think of the economy as a complex adaptive system. I think about a lot of things through a system approach. I think too many people kind of think of the economy as kind of like this fixed kind of thing, which is also why so many people worry about inflation as a result of higher demand, instead of thinking about how supply actually responds to demand and can even end up actually reducing the price based on a great deal more supply in order to meet that demand. So there's just a lot of different changes and equilibriums. And I just think that once we adopt UBI, that there will be some temporary effects that will be met with a new equilibrium. And I'm not really too concerned about those, because I think that, it's just the economy is not currently working properly, for everybody. Markets aren't working as efficiently as they could be due to a lack of demand signaling power. We kind of, I have this article out there about the difference between zero and null, where the market, let's say, imagine you're a business owner and you're selling ice cream and you just don't have any customers. There's actually no way to know for certain if you don't have any customers, because people don't have any money to buy your ice cream, or if it's because your ice cream sucks. So I think that if you make sure that everybody has the power to, essentially vote in the economy on what, let's say, is great and what sucks, then the market will respond better with, actual supply that we actually like, and we'll see a lot fewer businesses fail that actually had good ideas and good products and good services, but they fail due to a lack of consumer buying power. So I think that it'll make the economy actually work better, and that any kind of impacts in the short term will be adjusted to, and that potentially long-term changes will also point towards things that we should actually be purposely doing. So that could mean, say, purposeful investments in automation versus just kind of letting it do its thing. Like, there's definitely some smart investments we could be making, just like there's a smart investment we could be making right now to reduce the chip shortage and everything that's causing. We can utilize the signals that the economy is sending us to better manage the economy through, better kind of supply side responses, and thanks to like a strong demand that that we'll actually be able to see those better. Like, even kind of right now where you're seeing, inflation in certain areas, where that can actually tell us, well, we should, make changes in those areas. We should focus on the supply chain. We should focus on the chip shortage. We should focus on these kinds of things. And the response is not to, say, reduce incomes and therefore reduce spending power, and therefore no longer send those demand signals. Like, it's actually a good thing for there to be strong demand in order to bring back the economy and make sure that the economy, functions for the proper level of demand.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Basically, it's almost like a self-correcting problem. Like, UBI causes the economy to become much more flexible, so it's able to handle those impacts. That's really good. I like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And go for it.
I also think Hannah was next.
All right, thank you. Hey, Scott. Good to see you.
Hi, Anna.
Hi. So my question is regarding the Support Act introduced by Representative Omar. Thank you so much for advising on that. So back at the beginning of the pandemic, like March of last year, a colleague and I started the Testify for UBI project because we thought it was important to have a public hearing in Congress to educate members of Congress and the general public on UBI. And our basic strategy was to recruit testimonies from experts and everyday Americans that represented a diverse range of races, socioeconomic class, employment status, political affiliations, and so on, to really depoliticize UBI as a policy. And also, thank you for contributing a testimony to the project, Scott. So with regard to the Support Act, do you see that a public hearing like this is imminent, or what do you see as the path to getting the Support Act passed?
Gosh, I don't know. I think that there's certainly a future. It's always valuable to have people testify before Congress in various committees and hearings and things, and the more, basically, as mentioned, the better. The more informed Congress people are about this, the better. The more stories that they hear, the better. So there's certainly just value in general to that kind of approach. Like, even I actually testified before the Canadian Congress actually years ago for basic income too, and who knows what that did, but I like to think that it was at least part of the growth and support in Canada for basic income, that at least the people there got to hear that. So yeah, just in general, I think that's good and valuable. We should do more of that. And as for getting specifically the Support Act passed, I I don't know. We're in a interesting spot as far as the existence of the filibuster, the lack of the For the People Act being passed. Um, we're in this Delta scenario where that could potentially drive a conversation that points toward the Support Act and or at least a forced stimulus check or at least potentially automatic stabilizers, which I think that we still do need in order to automate the process of unemployment and stimulus checks going out. And I think all of these things potentially could be kind of compounded by whatever happens with Delta and even beyond Delta. Like, who knows about some future variant coming that's even worse than Delta? There's just a lot of open questions, and I guess all I can say for sure is that the more people get involved, the better. And however people can field is the best way for them to get involved, the better. So, I think you're a great example of coming up with an idea and helping organize that idea. And, thank you for doing that. And I hope that inspires other people to consider their own kind of approaches, what they can bring to the table, or the various kind of already existing things that are out there that they could become a part of. Like, again, the Basic Income March is a good example of something that provides people a medium of getting involved and even meeting people and networking in their local area, as far as meeting fellow basic income advocates and trying to reach out to, say, their mayors or city councils or local members of Congress, even from there.
Great, thank you so much, Scott.
And any follow-up question, Hannah? You're good?
Oh, no, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, definitely giving people paths that they can do in order to support UBI in general. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. To the DM question. You're getting hot now, Scott. Everybody's coming in. So, all right. So this one is from Twitter handle AM Bosco Boy, BOINIK, Nick. And so this is his question. Please ask it on my behalf. Rephrase if you consider it better. I think you're fine, Bosco. But basically is that what the thoughts about specifically proof of humanity, the protocol running and providing UBI running on Ethereum blockchain? Your thoughts about that, Scott?
I think that it certainly makes sense as kind of the first project built on a smart contract to be built on the smart contract platform with the largest community. And it's actually, I'm excited that, let's say, at the recent Ethereum conference, that even Vitalik himself was talking about proof of humanity. So, it's certainly on his radar and he likes the idea. So, I think that's incredible. And also, I think that there's certainly the opportunity for, other chains to bring a UBI-like project, even, variants, some kind of, they feel it's an improvement, some kind of difference. Say maybe it's built on Solana or, whatever else. I mentioned Solana too, just because I'm really impressed by, how fast it is and, how low the fees are. And I think that, when it comes to Ethereum, that's definitely some of the friction with UBI built on Ethereum, is that those gas fees can be pretty high. So I think that there's certainly space there for other cryptocurrencies to utilize that kind of approach and build their own on different chains. But as it is built on Ethereum, I think that it only makes sense and it's natural where you've got this big community of people and they've already, there's a community built around proof of humanity. They're excited. They're coming up constantly with new ideas. Like I was really impressed to see, the first urine vault be built that was actually built on, what is it, Dai? I'm not actually sure how to pronounce it, Day or Die. And, that actually provides, so it's 10% interest. And then when you harvest that interest, half of it goes to UBI to burn that, and the other half goes to people. And also the Ethereum UBI vault was also just built to provide something similar to that, where there's a burning process to help maintain the value of UBI. There's like a lottery system that was just set up, and I think that kind of approach is interesting too. But there's all kinds of like different community ideas bubbling up from the bottom up and to improve the project. And I think that that's definitely a value of being built on a chain that actually has a really active, large, involved, excited community.
Actually, I have a follow-up on that question. It's actually from me because you mentioned Solana. Did you mention about Solana, Scott?
Yeah, I just mentioned it. Yeah.
Gotcha. So actually, recently, they've raised $314 million. That's a huge raise. It seems like you probably know about Solana more than I do. I'm still learning about it, reading about it. Can you share a little bit more? I know you've shared just a little bit about Solana to those who are crypto addicts in the room right now. A little bit about Solana and how are they a competitor of Ether, or do they work with Ether? Now I know their token. Is it a token? It's SOL. Is that a token or a coin? Can you share a little bit for us, Scott?
Yeah. So Solana is another, say it's a potential Ethereum killer. So it's in that category as far as smart contract platforms that could become more popular than Ethereum potentially. The thing that kind of makes it different than other cryptocurrencies is that it uses what they call a proof of time. And proof of time, it's confusing. I'm not going to be able to explain it 100% accurately, but I would say that proof of time just enables a kind of timestamp to everything, and so therefore you could actually figure out the order that things were, categorized in the block by this timestamp. And because you're actually able to do that, you're able to vastly increase the speed of consensus. And so therefore you have much lower gas fees, and you have, I think it's like 30 or 40 something thousand transactions per second potential versus, the much slower transactions per second of your kind of normal chains like, Bitcoin or Ethereum or something.
And do you know about their token? Is it a token or a coin? So do they have their own blockchain, or is it a token?
It's a coin. I wouldn't describe it as a token.
Ah, interesting. All right. Aaron, go for it.
Yeah,
Thank
I was
you,
going to say
Scott.
something about Solana. Is that I believe part of what makes it a little bit faster is that I think the analogy has to do with like radio towers, in which they're able to change sort of a frequency so that like Ethereum can get kind of stopped up when there's too much going on, and that's what Solana sort of fixes.
Yeah, it's really interesting to look into even like how the person who came up with it came about it. And yeah, I think they worked previously at some like cell phone technology company. I don't remember what it is. Like maybe it was I don't even remember, like Nokia, Samsung, or I don't know. But yeah, he kind of brought what he learned from there to it. So yeah, I just think it's an interesting blockchain with good potential compared to various others.
Yeah, did you have let's see, we can I think the next one is going to be Matthew and then John, but Jen, if you had another DM.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I do have. I think I have one more, and that would be okay. This is from Rome didn't last forever. Okay, the Twitter handle is bits per second. And the question for you, Scott. Hi, Jenny. Question for Scott. Feel free to use my handle. Many UBI experiments trials have been done. Are there any experiments left that you think should be done or could be done that would move the needle or definitively prove the value of UBI to those on the fence? That's a good question. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, that is good. I have a blog on my Substack too that gets into these various experiments, and I would say that yeah, if you go to my Twitter profile and see my pinned tweet thread, that it's just this very long thread of evidence that I had started years ago, and then I make a point of adding more like experimental evidence and stuff to over time. It's gotten very long. There's a ton of data. There's a ton of stuff that we already know, and if you treat it as kind of like a puzzle where there's all these different pieces you put together, it paints a very clear picture that UBI works. So yeah, I believe that the evidence is already out there for everyone who wants to actually seek it out and study it and learn about it. And at this point, when it comes to the experiments that are going on, all across the country and around the world, that these things are really just about building support, building knowledge, getting buy-in politically to the idea. It's really about reaching this point where politicians feel that if they aren't for UBI, they'll lose, and if they're for it, that they'll win. That you need to actually get it going in order to be seen as a a politician that people support, and also on a bipartisan fashion. Hopefully, this is something that both Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, even around the world, can agree upon. But I think really it's about telling stories, and stories can actually move the needle in a way that data can't. So there's all this data out there, but who cares? Like, people are going to look at it, their eyes are going to glaze over. It's just they're disconnected from it. But like one powerful story, one story that someone can connect with personally, that they can see themselves in, or see like a friend or family member in, if they can really feel that kind of what it would do for them personally, or for someone they love or care about, then that can actually really be all that matters. So if you come up with the right anecdote, then I'm all about evidential data and not anecdotal data. But unfortunately, anecdotal data is what moves the needle oftentimes, both in a bad way and a good way. So we need these good stories that push the needle in the good way. And I think once you have those stories, then if you have enough of them across the widest variety of people to for enough people to see themselves in it, that it'll become more important to everybody. And that's really when things get done, especially when it's people with the political power. Once like they see that it would be good for them, then that's also how things get done. So that's how I see the current experiments. It's really more of a storytelling device and anecdotal data generation and not kind of proving to people that it works. And I also think that when it comes to the biggest kind of pilot of all, I think that the monthly child tax credit is going to play a big role in this, where thanks to tens of millions of parents in America receiving a monthly check for at least 6 months, and most likely, I think it will be permanent. So at least parents will feel what a basic income is like, and I think that will actually increase support where people without children are going to want that as well, instead of just for parents. And so I think that kind of this biggest experiment, again, is not so much about the data, although I think that it will grow the economy and that there will be good data points. I think that all the stories that come out of it and actually people feeling for themselves what it's like is going to do a lot for actually making basic income for everybody happen.
Cool. Aaron?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, we've been here almost 2 hours, so I want to be respectful of your time. We do have a few more people that wanted to ask questions, but definitely if you need to go, if it's too late, let us know. We won't be offended.
Yeah, I think we can do, let's end it in 5 minutes, let's say. So
You got
one, 2 questions possibly, depending on.
I'm glad I brought it up. Okay, so real quick, Matthew, and then John, if you can make it a little bit quick.
Sure thing. Thanks for all the great information, Scott. I'll try to make it quick. You kind of answered it with the politician piece. My question was kind of around, George Carlin joked about a populace capable of critical thinking isn't in the best interest of those in power. And so when I think about UBI, I think, there are a lot of people that really benefit from basically, a lot of people kind of being chained, if you will, to the system that we currently have in place. And I was curious if there's, how we should think about that, if there's anything there, or is that just kind of like conspiracy thinking, or is that just unproductive thinking, and we should just keep pushing forward until, like you said, the needle moves so much where people kind of have to. Does that make any sense?
Oh yeah, I mean, it kind of gets to even like the question of activism itself. Like, is change even possible? And there's the status quo is always built around maintaining the status quo. So it's not so much a conspiracy. It's not like people are conspiring against basic income or whatever improvement. It's that they benefit from the existing system, and so it's a gamble to see if you can benefit or not from a change in the system. So whenever we're talking about systemic changes, and I think UBI is one of those changes, you're going to face difficulties, and in the American context, it's certainly kind of more of a challenge because we are experiencing kind of an erosion of democracy. Like the Gillen's Page study even shows that what it is that most people want doesn't even matter. It doesn't have any impact on national policy of whether something passes or doesn't pass. It really just matters about those at the top and those with power. So that can be discouraging. It can feel that there's nothing to do, but at the same time, there's absolutely stuff you can do. You can, really press these levers that actually get members of Congress on board. If they feel that something is extremely popular or something unpopular, then that does change what it is they support or not support. So it's a matter of finding the right levers and pulling those levers. And this could even be a trial and error kind of thing where we're just doing everything we can, and some things are going to be more effective than others. But all we can do is keep trying to find those. And also simultaneously, I think it's important to, again, make democracy work better itself. Like we do need systemic reforms that improve democracy. So, I think the For the People Act is important I think the Fair Representation Act is important. I think that in general that state by state we need open primaries, ranked choice voting. There's all sorts of things we can do to improve democracy. Like Andrew Yang's democracy dollars, this kind of idea of a voting voucher, so that everybody can actually donate to campaigns instead of campaigns only relying on the rich. Like all of these changes that we can do to make democracy better will actually, I think, make UBI more likely. So I think that I'm a firm believer in going along multiple fronts at the same time.
Thank you.
John, you're the last one.
Yes, very interesting conversation. I'm actually from the United Kingdom, and I think I know this is an American context, but many of these arguments I think apply here. Do you think there's an international context to this which could help, drive change also in America and also within my own country and Europe? So could international solidarity and context help with this?
Oh, absolutely. I see this being as like a feedback mechanism where a project or moving of the needle in some country actually increases the support and movement in another country. So as an example, it was a big deal when Switzerland gathered the signatures it needed to vote on basic income. And even though they didn't actually pass it with that vote, it really generated so many articles around the world. So many more people learned about the concept. So many people started getting interested in the concept within their own countries. And I think that we've seen that continually. Like the Finland experiment helped build support globally for basic income. I think what we're seeing with the pandemic has done a lot in a way that is new and big. And I think that we're still looking at potentials. Like South Africa seems to be just in the past couple of weeks even talking about basic income to a much greater degree because it's experiencing even violence and rioting from how big their unemployment rate has gotten thanks to the pandemic. So as I don't know what the first country will be. It could be South Africa. It could be even South Korea. The one of the front runners for the president there is very pro UBI and has utilized UBI as a governor of his province. And so South Korea could be first. Canada could be first. The UK could be first potentially. Who knows what's going to happen? I think maybe in the UK it's more likely that something like Wales or Scotland is going, or Ireland even, is going to do something that will move the needle more before all of the UK does. But yeah, the question is who will be first? And I think it'll kind of fall like dominoes as far as more countries seeing the effectiveness of what the previous country did. And because we're in a globally competitive environment, that it'll just make sense for each country to adopt UBI, because otherwise they're going to lose a competitive edge to those who have adopted it. Because again, I just think that it'll result in a higher functioning economy and a more efficient use of resources, and they'll be actually more globally competitive. So yeah, I think that it's a positive feedback system. And I look forward to seeing, what is the first country that it'll be, because it will actually help everyone else advance the agenda too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Scott, John, Matt, for those last two questions. And here's how we're gonna wrap it up. We're going to let Dan say a few words to Scott, and then Aaron say a few words to Scott. Then obviously Scott take over the mic to let us know how we can assist you to help you move UBI and your advocates of what you've been doing forward. And you can share a little bit about your Patreon accounts and etc. etc. So on behalf of Aaron, I will say first, and and Tim, who is not here. And thanks for Dan being a co-host today. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation to be on our show today. We're super, super honored, especially me. Thank you so much. And go ahead, Dan, then Aaron, and then Scott. You get the final words afterwards.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. So first off, Scott, I really appreciate everything that you had to say tonight. It seems like we are on the same page on a lot of different issues, from healthcare to UBI. I am a candidate for the United States Senate, and listening to you talk about the involvement of politicians and having to get people, backing these different policies, I think also what we really need to focus on is education, because a lot of politicians don't understand what UBI is and how we're going to pay for it. And the way that you explain how we're going to pay for it and what it is, I think that can be very enlightening and eye-opening to a lot of different candidates and politicians. So thank you for that. I would love to meet up with you as well sometime in a side conversation to see how I can help promote UBI in a bigger way, to make sure that when I am promoting it, I'm more knowledgeable, and I don't sound coming off like I'm ignorant. But thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, thank you for running. And yeah, let's chat sometime.
Aaron, go for it, and then Scott will wrap it up.
On that note, actually, I actually have been thinking about this for a while. It'd be really cool to get so basically an open invite to you, because I'd really like it if we could get Dan, Viz, we had Louis Marinelli, Matthew Deemer, we had Jillian Bettino. I'd actually really like to bring everyone back for sort of like a super panel that I mentioned Rishi Kumar. So for a conversation for people to network and to get to know each other and to kind of even talk about these issues amongst each other. So it'd be really cool if you wanted to be there. But I also, again, wanted to thank you for taking the time, for being here, for answering everyone's questions. Really, really, really appreciate it.
Thanks. Yeah, no, that sounds fun to do, like with some kind of big panel kind of discussion. So yeah, if the timing and scheduling works out, then yeah, I'm totally open to that.
Awesome. Again, thank you.
So you got the mic, Scott. Share with us your last few words, how we can assist you, Patreon account, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. For everyone in the audience, like, what can we be doing to help with this whole endeavor?
Yeah. So I guess if you're on Twitter, then please follow me there. Subscribe to my tweets so you're able to not miss anything, and make a point of boosting UBI content, following UBI advocates. I think that building up the network and amplifying the UBI say signals helps it break through the noise, and also hopefully encourages people to share UBI stuff on other platforms as well. So please consider that, and you can support my work personally at patreon.com/Scott Santens. You can support the work of Humanity Forward by becoming a monthly donor to Humanity Forward to help the efforts of lobbying for the people for basic income. And also again, please check out basicincomemarch.com and potentially sign up to be a part of that in wherever you're located, if there's a location nearby you can get to, or potentially help plan out one for your location. And yeah, those are definitely the top things you can start at to get more involved.
Thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you so much, Scott, Aaron, Dan. We wanted to thank everybody, the speakers, those who asked the questions, everybody in the room, listeners, to supporting us. And please go and follow Scott. I'm a huge fan of his, and obviously, if you're also a Yang gang, I see he tweets and retweets a lot of Andrew Yang stuff too. So yeah, support him. And if you support him, you support UBI. So Thank you, everybody, for coming. Aaron, I'll let you wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Scott. Like I said before, I really can't thank you enough. You're very knowledgeable. Anyway, thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you for joining. And let's make shit happen. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks,
There you
everyone,
go.
for showing up.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
All
Bye,
right, bye-bye.
everybody. Bye.